The reality is founding a company is going to be the most rewarding, most fulfilling thing that you ever do. But it's also going to be the hardest thing you ever do, the most challenging thing you ever do, and the most emotionally taxing thing you ever do. And having a network of like-minded people that are going through the same experience and can support you and challenge you and help you along this arduous but rewarding journey, I think is the biggest reason to join.
Hey everyone. I am pleased to say thank you all for joining. I can see I asked the question, is Dave Graham here? Dave Graham is here. Hi, Dave. Good to see you. Who else is here? Just say hi in the chat. I can see we've got a few people lined up here. Jean-Louis Bernard, Adam. Good to see you. Niels Lagerstrom. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Hopefully you can't hear my dog dreaming in the background as well. But these things happen. Pat, always good to see you. So thank you so much for attending today. This is obviously a private session for the SaaStock founder members and an audience with Mark Roberge. And like Dave, I think actually Dave Graham posed the question about what has changed, if anything, since Mark published the sales acceleration formula, which we thought was a great question and a great reason to invite Mark to discuss that a little bit. And I don't want to hog the mic. We want to use this as a great opportunity for you, the SaaS founders, to ask Mark, any questions that you have as you're building your SaaS companies, on that path to 10 million in revenue. So I'm going to invite Mark up. There we go. There you are, Mark.
Hey, what's up, Alex? How are you? Hey,
everyone. Yeah, good to see you. And thanks once again for giving up your time here for the SaaS founder members. And so this is, we're building a private community of SaaS founders that are all on their journey to 10 million ARR, and through support groups, global network, and then these education-based sessions such as these. And we ask our members, about the topics that they want to hear. We've got many that are doing, enterprise sales, some that are doing SMB sales. HubSpot did both. And obviously you no longer work at HubSpot, but now you're investing in hundreds of SaaS companies, or you've been working with hundreds of SaaS companies. But maybe we start. We just give a kind of an update in terms of like what you're doing now, like your sort of further, recent credentials, and then we'll jump into the meat of it.
Yeah, because the book, I know a lot of people are asking like, what's different since the book was written. So the book was written like in my final year at HubSpot, where we were going through the IPO, and it was largely the inspiration was, if anyone have read Jill Conrath's work, she's an amazing writer and best-selling author. And we had breakfast and she's like, we should write a book together. And I'm like, Jill, I'm not a very good writer. But no, if you want to write a book together, that's great. And so we both wrote a chapter, and she encouraged me to write my own book. And to be quite frank, like I had been spending my commute to and from HubSpot, which was about an hour with traffic, just taking calls with entrepreneurs. And they had all the same questions about how to hire salespeople and compensate them and run a sales process. And I basically gave the same answers, and I would get notes like a week or two later being like, wow, that was really great. And here's what we didn't really worked well. So the contents of the book was pretty straightforward. It was really just my experiences in building the HubSpot sales team and how I've seen that be applicable to many other companies. Since then, I after the IPO, I joined the faculty at Harvard Business School and have been teaching their sales course that we built out the last 7 years. And then through that process, I was like probably helping about a dozen startups every year on building their sales channel. And then 3 years ago, a gentleman at Bessemer, a great VC firm named Jay Poe, had an idea for the first VC firm that's run and backed by go-to-market executives. So we went out and started asking people if they'd be interested, and it just went viral. We have 250 investors, the CROs, CMOs, COOs of like Snowflake, Asana, LinkedIn, Dropbox, Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, Twilio, like pretty much most of the software unicorns. Their executive team is our backers. We did 11 investments in Fund 1, and we've done 10 investments in Fund 2. We typically invest when companies are building their first sales team. They have gotten through the first product market fit. They're usually about 500,000 in US revenue. And we engage with them and help them set up the foundation in what we believe is the best practice way, using the network around us. So that's what we're up to. And that kind of is the underpinning of how things have changed since I wrote the book. Is I would say I was like 9 miles deep into HubSpot and like half a mile deep into other contexts. And now I would say like I just spend all my day, like literally, I'll probably look at 12 sales teams a day, right? So it's like for almost like 8 years now. So it's just like I guess I've just like amassed pretty like broad viewpoint of everything from large $1 million enterprise sales all the way down to product-led growth, which is something I'm really excited about too. So we can dive into any of those arenas.
Right. Yeah, would be great to dive into enterprise sales and the product-led growth and SMB sales, as I think we've got that mix
Nice.
within the audience. And just a question around your investing. Do you invest in US only, or is it geography agnostic?
Yep, geo-agnostic. We did a play that came out of London actually, and is now in the US as well. Sales Impact Academy. We invested in that this spring, and we've looked at a bunch out there. We did an Australian company. We just did a Argentinian company. So yeah, we're global.
Awesome. Well, Mark, I think as you know, you were the first ever guest on the SaaS Revolution podcast, and in preparation for that, I read your book, cover to cover. And then, what is it? 6 years later, for this, I reread the book this weekend, and it was good, a really good refresher, right? So I kind of wanted to, touch on some of the points of the formula, and then I guess kind of like you pick your brains in terms of from the companies that you're working with, and then building these like sales teams today, what you're seeing, that they're doing, and any best practices that you can kind of share.
Sure.
And then obviously we'll take the questions from the audience. So
I don't know if okay, Alex, I'd encourage people, if you have questions, just put them in chat. It won't disturb me, and then Alex can just get to them, or we can get to them as we go. So
yeah, there we go. And we got
like,
one straight.
You can tee up Alex with the opening ones. It's cool.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I'll get to Dave's question in a minute. I just want to say on the sales hiring formula, which kind of kicks off. This is part of the first part of the formula for the sales acceleration formula. And you talk about building a recruitment agency within the company. Now, my thoughts are like, that's great, right? But are you if you're not venture backed, or like what sort of size revenue do you have to be able to do that? So like for instance, I mean, we're not a SaaS company, even though we've got some recurring revenue, but like for us in our context, I would feel that we would be too small to build an agency. But what is the kind of the right size? What size were you when you did that?
We were we were venture backed. But let's just talk through like what it would look like without, and then you can do, it's easier when you have some capital to think about it. We just to answer your question directly, we were maybe 40 employees when we did it. I don't know, a couple million, maybe 5 million revenue, something like that. But so just to give you the background there, I had gotten to the size. We had been using like recruiters, agencies, external, right? And then I wanted to just, I was kind of thinking about, should we keep doing that? Should we bring it in-house? And a very smart exec told me, and I don't want to offend anyone, but like there's a large population of corporate recruiters who like work for a company, and they get paid like modestly, and they're not really like aggressive, like going after passive candidates. They're kind of like posting your job ad on the website and Indeed, getting a bunch of applications, resumes, and then sending you resumes to see who you like. That's kind of what they do. And that doesn't work well in recruiting top talent, especially on sales. And I often say like the best salespeople never really need to look for a job. If you're a top salesperson, you always have your ex-bosses like pinning you every quarter, being like, hey, are you happy? Like, I'm at this new gig. You should really think about joining me. Like, they don't really have to put a resume together. So if your recruitment strategy is to post, the role on your website and job boards, you're going to get the active candidates who tend to not be the best players, right? And that made sense to me. Now, when you deal with more of an agency recruiter, we get these calls all the time, right? They do cold call people. They reach out to you on LinkedIn. They reach out to you on email. They sell the job. The problem with an agency is you are one of 50 clients. So when they get a top salesperson to surface and be like, hey, you know what? I actually am in the market. Who does the agency send that top person to? They send it to the person that's paying the most money because they get paid on a percentage of the salary. So if you're paying the most money, then great, work with the agency. But if you're not going to get the best talent. And furthermore, it's just like, you know, again, that agency is selling 50 different clients. So it's like, they can't be awesome at selling you, you know? And so that was the whole point, was like set up an internal recruiting function, but don't do it like a traditional corporate recruiting where they're just going to post ads and then get resumes. Like, go find agency people. And what that means is you have to pay them like an agency person. At the time, and I don't know the numbers now, but at the time, I think a typical internal corporate recruiter in the startup ecosystem here in Boston would be paid $80,000 a year, versus an agency recruiter would be paid $75,000 base with 75,000 commission with upside if they do a better job in recruiting. So that was really all I did. And I found a woman that was at an agency thinking about starting her own agency. And I was like, just do it here at HubSpot. And she was like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, you know, I'll pay you 75 base, 75 commission or whatever it was. And then we'll hire more people as we scale, and you can pay them like agency recruiters, and you just do it within HubSpot and you have one client. And so that was the only difference. So to your point, Alex, like, okay, fine, you're not venture backed, but you need to find people. So you have like a couple of choices. One, you can use 0 recruiters and just do it on your own, which is fine. If you've got the time, I don't think that's crazy. But if you are going to use recruiters, you can use an agency where you're going to pay 20% of their salary to them, which might be what you have to do in a bootstrap situation, and just hope that you work with a smaller agency that isn't going to be overly competitive with other clients. Or you can hire someone internally if you're really going to hire a lot of people this year. I would say like 10 plus. But you know, hopefully that makes sense for like the software startups here. That's where that thinking happened. It worked really well for us.
Awesome. I'm going to take Dave Graham's question. Dave, CEO CMAT Software. Thanks for putting the first question out there to Mark. So did your sales team only ever call inbound leads and never do any cold calls?
So
and then what did they do to fill the gaps if they didn't have enough leads coming from marketing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave. In fact, like they still teach the HubSpot case at HBS, at Harvard Business School. Jill Avery and a bunch of other authors wrote that a long time ago. They won a bunch of awards for it, actually. It's a bestseller case. And they teach it in the first year required marketing curriculum. And that's what the case is about. Your question, Dave, where it's like, and this is a real story. It was like 2009, I think, when up until that point, we only had sold inbound leads. We had scaled to set and only sold inbound leads. And I was making a case to Brian and Dharmesh, my team needs to start cold calling. And they were like, you're crazy. Like, we are an inbound marketing company. Like, the minute we start cold calling, it like contradicts everything we're about. It's going to kill our brand. And I was like, yeah, but you don't understand my perspective. Like, I stand up in front of the board every year, and they're like, you're going to go from 20 million to 40 million this year. And I have to do that. And what happens if marketing messes up one month and there's no leads? I'm going to get fired. Like, the board doesn't care. So I need more control. Like, I hope that cold calling isn't the primary vehicle of customer acquisition, but I need a backup plan if the inbound leads go sideways. And so they were like, all right, fine. Like, we'll run a test for 2 months. But if we see anything on Twitter about like HubSpot's like a fake, like I just got a cold call, then we're shutting it down. And we never did. Like so basically I did specialize a team. So we kept the inbound team, and we sent all of our inbound leads directly to an account executive, which I like to do a lot. I don't see it. I see a lot of inbound leads sent to SDRs. I don't like that. because it's usually a 22-year-old experienced salesperson dealing with your best leads. It's very hard to operationalize an account executive to call those correctly, but I think outside of the first lead, when it comes in and you want to call them within 5 minutes, I do think an account executive can be disciplined to carve out a third of their day to be prospecting on the leads that they have. And that's rarely done in industry, but I do think that's an opportunity if you can have the right management and leadership to do that. In the early days, we specialized a cold calling team, which is also, I think, rarely done, and I think was critical. Because when you have an account executive, or let's say an SDR, because we did use SDRs to cold call there. If you have an SDR that gets inbound leads and has to cold call, they're never going to cold call. They're just going to do, get the inbound leads, and they'll never get to the cold calling. If you have an account executive who gets appointments from inbound leads and appointments from cold calls, they're never going to sell the appointments from cold calls. They're just really hard. The inbound lead appointments are much more warmed up. So I had to specialize a team so that they had to figure it out. And we used a higher ratio of SDRs to reps. I think we used a 3 SDRs to 2 account executive ratio in there, and we got it to work. And like 3 years later, I would say 40% of our revenue came from inbound leads. Actually, 40% came from a partner channel, which was interesting, and 20% came from the cold calling. So it all kind of worked nicely. And then the final point of your question, Dave, is supplementing, and that's something that it's really tricky, because like you never want a salesperson to feel dependent on something to hit their number. And if you tell a salesperson you're going to get a bunch of inbound leads and then you get your number, you're not setting up that dependence. So even for salespeople who are on the inbound team, I always really encourage those teams to say you're going to get to roughly 70 to 80% of your number from your inbound leads. Some months marketing will do great and you'll get all the way there. Other months marketing will do bad and you only get halfway there. And you're expected to supplement that by getting 20 to 30% of your number from your own outreach. And an outreach from an account executive is different than the outreach that an SDR would do. It's much more strategic. Like an SDR is running through their outreach and sales loft like cadences and sequences, but an account executive is like spending potentially 20 or 30 minutes crafting an extremely personalized note or report or something that they're going to send to an executive. Or they might even dip into, this is kind of Adam's question here, one of the areas that we don't tap into enough is our closed losts from like 6 months ago. That's gold. I mean, if you're a good sales team, you're closing what, 20 to 30% of your sales opportunities every quarter? That means 70 to 80% are closed lost. And we're not going back to them that often, like 6 to 9 months later, and that's gold. So that's a good example of where they can supplement it.
Just on that point, then on the closed loss, do you have any data to share when your sales team's going back to those leads? Like, what were they converting on those?
I never looked at it, but I would guess if we were converting opportunities that were created new, like from a fresh account, if we were converted them like 30% of the time to a sale, I would say opportunities that were created from a closed lost outreach, where it's like, oh yeah, actually we are interested now. I would say it was more like 50% close rate, because they already knew what was happening. Like we looked at that 8 months ago, the timing wasn't right, but now is a better time to look at it. And the close rate was higher. So that's an opportunity that I don't think a lot of folks are digging into.
Yeah. I guess that sort of answers Adam's question. So Adam,
I guess so. It reactivated registered users after relaunch. I think he's more like a product-led growth. If you want to come back to us, Adam, with a little more context there, if that's like a PLG model, we can do that, and then come back to you.
Yeah. On the PLG stuff. Yeah. So in 2015, it was probably see more sales-led growth, marketing-led growth companies, and then PLG is now the soup du jour as stuff. In the last sort of year or two for SaaS companies. Yeah, so how has either like the formula changed in your mind with regards to kind of PLG, or what are really kind of the best practices for a PLG company for for sales. Adam loves PLG, by the way.
I love it. I love it. Like, that's the theme I'm most excited about. We have a bunch of investment themes, but I'm very excited about trying to bet on the PLG attacker in every category. Let me hold that for 1 second, Alex, because Jacques has a quick follow. How would you get back to closed lost? So it's pretty easy, Jacques. You basically, what's nice about closed lost is you've typically accumulated a lot of very specific information about the account in terms of, like, you know, what their pain was, what their team looks like, what their needs were, you know, et cetera. So you really just lob back a summary of that. You know, it might be something, if I would go channel like the HubSpot thing, it would be like, hey, Jacques, you know, I know we had a really great conversation back in Q1 of last year and the timing wasn't right. You had mentioned at the time that you all were struggling because a lot of, you know, a good chunk of your demand gen had been done through in-person events, and you're really struggling in a post-COVID environment around demand generation, and you were looking for some alternatives, and that the inbound lead flow was a high converter for you, but it was really trickling, and you're trying to figure out a strategy on how to up-level that a bit. And I know, like, you were going through some transitions on your website and your marketing team at the time. I'm just curious, have you fixed your demand gen issues, or is there something we should get back to on that conversation? Something like that, Joe. That's the difference with like going after closed loss, is you have tremendous personal context that you can lean into and try to entice them. So let's switch over to your question, Alex. PLG. Wow. I mean, just Google PLG or product-led growth, folks. If you're not familiar, let me just try to like define it. I mean, it's really coming out of like freemium to some degree. It just essentially means that the customer has an opportunity to extract value. The way I define it is the customer can extract value from your product before they buy. Okay, so like arguably we've been doing this with free trials. In a lot of PLG situations, like a Calendly or a Zoom or a Slack, you can often like use this product for quite a long time without buying it, right? They're just looking for you to trip over some sort of consumption metric. And, you know, I personally believe that it is a business model and go-to-market model disruption that can be as impactful to the ecosystem that SaaS was in the last 2 decades. Not quite as impactful, because I do think that SaaS was applicable to almost all software sectors, and PLG certainly is not. For PLG to work, there needs to be sort of like a low time and effort to retainable value use case. Like, you know, like you literally do something that takes a minute or two, and in a minute or two, you get value that's recurring, right? Like Dropbox is like, boom, click, your files are backed up. Slack, you know, it's a little more time, but it's like you and I can jump on a Slack, Alex, and like we could be communicating like through that medium. Calendly, I can set that up in a minute with my calendar, and Alex, you can have my calendar and book something. Like, these are all great examples of like a low time and effort to value. Workday, no. Like, we're managing your entire company's like HR stack and payroll. Like, that's not PLG. You know what I mean? So it's not as applicable for the categories where it is applicable. That's critical. This is exciting because we're still writing a playbook on this. So a couple examples is like, if you take a sales team that's more like an MQL driven sales team that's used to like getting inbound leads, which are people who are requesting demos or downloaded ebooks, and then you suddenly introduce a PLG playbook where you build this free product and you're going to have your sales team call into it. That sales team will ruin PLG. They will ruin PLG, because the minute someone downloads the product, they're going to call them, do discovery, give them a demo, and ask them to buy the product. And that's not PLG. PLG is like, they got into the product and they have a particular goal in mind and they want to see that works. And if it works, they'll consider buying it, right? Or they'll just use it until they trip a wire and see enough value to buy it. So your first call, just an example, is you have to either choose between letting the person just do their thing humorously, or you can call them and almost be CSM first, where you're like, hey, Alex, like I noticed you downloaded, our free product. And instead of saying like, you do discover like, what did you want to do? What are you trying to solve, et cetera. But instead of flipping from there to a demo and then try to get them to buy, you flip to, here's how you do that. let's set it up, give it a shot for a few days, and I'll check in with you. So you're kind of CSM first, and then you let the product kind of like lead the value creation and then lead into the sale. The other thing that's critical, like tactically there, is the compensation model. And I talked about this at SaaStock last week, where most sales compensation models are born out of the 1980s, where you're paid more for the revenue, the first revenue from an account, and less for the expansion revenue. And in the 80s, that made sense. It's really hard to open a door and get $1 million software sale in there, and a lot easier to sell them $100,000 more stuff a year later when you have a relationship. But these days, when the buyers can download this stuff and start using it with 2 people, even though they have 1,000 employees and all 1,000 employees could use it, they just want to start with 2 people. And if it works, they'll expand to 1,000 people. But if you're paying your salespeople more for the first revenue from an account, then they get on the phone with the prospect, and the prospect's like, yeah, I've been using your product. I love it. And I would consider a enterprise agreement with you all. And in fact, what I'd love to do is I'd like to just try the product out with this team of 6 people. And if that goes well, I will roll it out to my 1,000 employees. And the salesperson's like, no. And they say no because like that's how they're paid, right? They're going to get a lot less money. And so you really should consider, and I use this at HubSpot, and I've used this for a lot of our portfolio company, paying those hunting reps 20% more for follow-on expansion revenue. And now they're aligned with the buyer. They're like, yeah, fine. You want to use it on 6 accounts? Perfect. Use it on 6 accounts. And then I'll check in with you next quarter or next month, and we'll see if we roll it out to the next team. And they're incented to do that. And I'm not trying to turn the hunter into a CSM. I'm just trying to get that rep to be aligned with how the buyer wants to buy, and also to set really good expectations and be really honest about everything that needs to be done, like what the product does and how to set it up, so that that first pilot goes well and they get the expansion. So go ahead, Alex.
There's a couple of tying questions onto that. I'll take Eve Birkin's one first, and because we're talking about sales compensation. So what about being really crazy and stop paying salespeople based on their sales? Doesn't it solve a lot of issues? Up to you to find a model that makes them motivated.
Yeah, who wrote about that? Daniel Pink wrote about that. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry, I cut you off.
You know, I was going to say, a few years ago, I met another Belgian founder, Eve, so he's from Belgium, who wasn't paying his sales team any commission. He just paid them more, like, paid them a good salary, and they were kind of bought into that. And I did think he was really crazy, but am I wrong?
Did it work?
I don't know. Well, actually, I mean, they scaled past 10 million in revenue. I know that.
Okay, that's cool.
I haven't been following them, so
I've seen it attempted in short terms without a lot of success, and I don't know if it's like, I don't know why. Like Daniel Pink wrote about it in To Sell Is Human, I believe, like 10 years ago, and it's interesting. I mean, you would think logically with the moves here, like why are like engineers not paid on commission, and marketing's not paid on commission, CSMs are not paid on commission, support people aren't paid on commission. It's just harder to like measure like their individual contribution versus sales. And I'm trying to think, like, the short end is a great question. There's possibly some potential in there, and I'd have to think about like where the starting point would be on that. Probably something very mission driven and altruistic and societal, driven, where it would work, where the true motivations and attraction of these people is not necessarily the money, but like really the mission of the company. It would work. But for some reason, all the attempts I've seen have not. And I think what's happening there is that culture and plan probably is not attracting the best salespeople, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I think the people, if we just measure best salespeople as people who go out and acquire the most customers that are good customers for you in a time period, those people are going to be attracted to a coin-operated, like leveraged compensation plan, not a fixed salary. I think that's probably why it's not working,
I'll have to try and remember the name of this Belgian SaaS company. It had team in its name, but I'll come back to the group on that one, and we'll find out how they're doing it. Dave Graham, back to Dave. So he's got an enterprise-wide product, but is looking at bringing PLG, I think, into the company, and also studying HubSpot. But how do you do that if it's not PLG and you want to move to PLG?
All right. So first we got to figure out if it's possible, and then oh my gosh, trying to introduce it into a company. I got a playbook for you, but like it's hard. We're doing a little bit at Sudoso now, and it's going pretty well. But like I'll tell you why it's hard. It's kind of like why the on-premise companies like SAP and Siebel trying to introduce SaaS, right? All the innovators' dilemma, like challenges with it. But first off, let's talk about like, well, what makes something PLG friendly? Okay. So the first one is that low time and effort to retainable value. Okay. So Workday is not low time and effort. Like, it's just not a category you can go after. It's like, you can't click a button and within 5 minutes have all your like employees like on payroll and the HR system set up and whatever, right? So there's certain categories where it doesn't work. The retainable value is important because like, look at Website Grader, like our early product. That was not, it was a little bit PLG, but it just wasn't as effective because it wasn't retainable value. If you weren't familiar with our Website Grader product, basically what it did, Dharmesh built it like in the early days, and it was just like you go to websitegrader.com, you put in your URL, and within 30 seconds, it spit out a 5-page report about how to optimize your website for SEO. And it's like, it's at the time, people were spending like $10,000 for like these SEO consultants to do this report, but it was actually all programmatic. And so huge value, like low time and effort to value, but it wasn't retainable value because once people had the report, it was like, there was no reason to come back every day. Like it was the same freaking report, So like Calendly, beautiful. Like, yeah, I mean, I click a button, it syncs with my calendar, and now I include it in my signature, and I just say book a meeting here, and that's forever. Slack forever, Dropbox forever, so you have to look for that. And virality is not critical, but it helps. Calendly has wonderful organic virality, right? It's like, I see it, I'm like, wow, that was a cool app. I should download that. DocuSign has wonderful organic virality. Hey, sign my document. Wow, that was a really cool experience. Let me do that too, right? Dropbox, I don't know, their natural backup use case is not amazing virality. Sharing documents is, which they kind of got, and they've tried with their paper products and other products. HelloSign they purchased, like they're trying to get more use cases in virality. But it's nice, but it's not necessary. I don't know if like Slack has a lot of like cross-company boundary virality. Like there's some situations like Alex and I can get on a Slack channel together, but most of Slack's virality is occurring within the company, which is limited, right? So we have to, and also like a big horizontal market is important. Like if you're selling to like, I don't know, like governments, I don't know if PLG is going to work that well. Like there's just not that many of them. It's like, it's so let's look at it from that filter first, Dave. Is it possible? Now you need to introduce PLG into an existing company. That is hard because it's going to cause your sales to go down for at least a quarter. And that's hard to swallow. So what's happened here, like, let's say, let's just take HubSpot again. And let's say that we were introducing PLG to the marketing product. And we actually tried to do this. We were at 10 million in revenue. And we started, we all went to MIT with Drew, and we were in touch with them early over at Dropbox. And we were very jealous of like the crazy motion that they built there. And Dharmesh was like, we have to do this. We have to do this too. So we introduced like a free product with a $50 upgrade, and it bombed. And the reason why it bombed, well, first off, it wasn't possible in the marketing product because there was no low time and effort to retainable value use case. It was like blog for 2 months and your leads will go up. That's not low time and effort to value, right? So we didn't have it. But even if it did, like you're hesitant to put enough value in the free product for it to be valuable because you don't want to cannibalize your $10 million install base. Because if you actually built, if you built the free product that you would have built from scratch, a lot of your install base is going to downgrade. And not a lot of companies are willing to take on that cannibalization. So what you sort of have to do is you have to almost have this, like, I don't want to say secret project, but it's like a separate project where you're funneling a certain amount of traffic, or even stand up some like Facebook, Instagram ad that's sent to a landing page, and just start experimenting with it. Start sending users in, see how many people, sign up to the product, see how many people activate the product, see how many people become MAUs, WOWs, and DAOs, and just experiment until you're confident that that works. Then you have to disrupt your business. You have to actually roll that out to all of your lead flow, and your revenue is likely going to go down because some of your customers will downgrade to the free or cheaper product, and your salesperson productivity will go down because a lot of the leads they typically sold a reasonable amount to are now going to go to the free product and buy a cheaper amount. So then you're like, why should I do that? Well, if you don't do it to your business, someone else will. They will. You're in a big disruptive risk. So that's how you have to do it. And because of the revenue will probably go down for a quarter, you almost have to time it right after a fundraise if you're in a venture cycle, to give yourself the 12 to 18 months necessary to recover from that pivot. Okay. And if you're not in a venture cycle, then you just have to prepare for being off quarter. So I wrote an article on the Stage 2 website on product-led growth and all the details. I teach a class on it at Harvard. So if you want to dig into more details than my 3-minute ramble, but hopefully, Dave, that gets you a little bit of a perspective. The reason why we're successful with that HubSpot is our sort of separate secret project skunk work was the CRM, right? So we were just a marketing software company, and we had this clean slate with the sales tech stack, with the CRM, and that happened to have a lot of use cases that were low time and effort to value, namely downloading a Chrome extension so that salespeople could see all the people that were emailing them and everything about them. It was initially called Sidekick. So we had this beautiful little sandbox to play in, and that's how we were able to succeed with it. And we used that to disrupt the rest of the business over the years.
Good 3-minute ramble.
Maybe more, but
yeah, no, I think hopefully that was helpful, Dave. I'm sure it was. And Mark, you mentioned it a couple of times about me and you on a Slack channel. Like, if you don't mind, I'm happy to set that up whenever.
Nice.
I'm going to go back to an earlier question, and so I didn't forget Jean-Louis Bernard here. So when he was speaking earlier, but he mentions about enterprise sales. So their ticket is 100K plus ACV. When you think that the first outbound conversation is already a strategic one and should require an AE rather than an SDR for outbound?
Definitely. So once you're dealing with 100K plus, your PLG isn't the model. MQL to SDR team is not the model. It's account-based marketing, account-based selling, right? So you look at the work of Terminus and the 6 Sense and these account-based marketing, account-based selling folks, right? So in this case, it's like, there's lots of different implementations of them, but like as an example, we might have an account executive and SDR as a team, okay, and they are assigned these 10 accounts, and the two of them are going to go after this one account first, right? So we're gonna go after like Thermo Fisher, okay, a big account. So what we're going to do is the SDR is going to find 100 contacts at Thermo Fisher that are typically part of the decision-making unit of our product, right? So if we were selling HubSpot, it would be, I think there's like 200 business units in Thermo Fisher. So all the CMOs and VPs of marketing of those, and even the director of marketing. And so they would run a sequence against all those like high volume, 10 attempts over a 3-week period against those mid-level executives. The account executive is doing much more strategic prospecting into the executive team. That is like high value, super personalized. Okay, so this is just an example, and this is a very extreme example, but it proves the point. One of my buddies, an extremely successful salesperson, Adobe, Salesforce, etc., like big $1 million rep. And he had moved over, he got moved over to Salesforce. And this was like 6 years ago. I was playing golf with him. So he unfortunately got signed the Toys R Us account, which obviously they went out of business. But at the time they were still in business. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, how do you get into Toys R Us? Because I know they're an Oracle shop and you're selling for Salesforce, and the Salesforce has no like implementations there. And he's like, I'm not going to call him for like 2 months. I'm like, what? You're not going to call him? He's like, no, I'm spending all day buying stuff from Toys R Us. He's like, all I do is I go on and I go on the website. I look at their ads. And then I switch browsers to see if they remember who I am. And I put stuff in the cart and I see if I log in over here, do they remember the cart? And do they change the way that they're marketing to me based on what's in my cart? And then I check out and I see if they upsell me. Then I download the mobile app and I see if that's updated. I take screenshots of everything. And then I put together a 50-page like paper, like physical paper brochure, and I mailed it to the 50 executives at Toys R Us. He's like, I had a meeting a week later with the whole executive team. I mean, I was like an internal, like the best consultant they've ever met on the like how well they were doing on the personalization front on their digital strategy. So that's the point, is like, you know, hopefully that's an interesting story, that like that's an extreme version, but that's how it's different. Is you got an SDR and an AE. The SDR is doing the high volume yet personalized hits on the mid-management team, and the salesperson's doing that very strategic, personalized lobs in to get into at the executive level.
Awesome. And I guess from these large enterprise deals back to sort of PLG here, but Subhanjan Sarkar from PitchLink, he asks, what do you think about a longer full-featured trial period, say 90 days? What are your thoughts on that?
Because what is he doing again? What is his full-featured 90-day trial?
Subhanjan, what did you drop in the chat?
It's okay. Yeah, you can put it in while I'm talking here. That's like, it's a long time. I'm trying to figure out what to say. I mean, you're kind of reminding me of almost like what we just typically associate with more of like a proof of concept. So you're buyer engagement SaaS, okay? Like you're kind of flirting with like more proof of concept land, 90 days, you know what I mean? So, and I'm assuming like if this is like you're dropping in them humorously, they've never talked to anyone and they're trying this thing for 90 days. I don't know. It's hard for me to think why that wouldn't be 7 days or 30 days. Like what is it? If there's just a long time that they have to do it, I feel like we need people involved. And if we need people involved, we're probably more in a proof of concept. And if we're in a proof of concept, then I'm kind of approaching that pretty differently. You know, I'm kind of saying like, okay, let's make sure we've done all the discovery. Let's make sure we built out the business case. Let's make sure we've done the ROI analysis. Make sure that we have everybody on the decision-making unit involved. And let's make sure we have really clear definitions of what the heck we're trying to get visibility into during this proof of concept. I'm fine with a 90-day proof of concept, but I just want to make sure like what is success? What is failure? If success happens, we have a deal. Can you sign a letter of intent on that or whatever? You know what I mean? Like if we're going through that much work, I may even want to charge for the proof of concept. Like I'm just handling that differently. So I don't know, like we're over a chat here. But like, if there's not humans involved, I question why it needs to be 90 days. And if there are humans involved, I'd probably approach this more like a little bit of like a traditional proof of concept. So go ahead, Alex.
Awesome, thanks. I feel like we've got time for one or two more questions. Whilst we await another question, if we have one from the founders that are here.
I know someone said way back when the partner channel, someone want to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. That was Jacques, actually.
But Alex, if you have something that you're really
no. Let's go. Yeah. It's a good one. Let's go on the partner channel.
Yeah, partners is interesting, right? Like, so if we back up for a second, I feel like partners initially is a trap for some of the early stage folks, and I know why it happens. It's because like you're a founder, CEO, maybe you have more of a product engineering background. And so it starts working. You're doing founder selling, stuff starts working. So you're like, okay, now we have to really scale sales. We raise a Series A and we're ready to go. They're looking at two options: hire salespeople who are expensive and scary, and now it's going to change your culture, or holy cow, like Oracle has this huge sales team. Our product is additive to their whole product landscape. why don't we just sell through them? Then I don't have to pay for salespeople, and I don't have to change my culture, and they already know how to sell. And so they lean into that. And it sounds brilliant, but it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is a lot of reasons. First off, usually at that stage, at the founder sell and transition stage, you actually don't know how to codify your sales process. You don't know how to you don't have what I call go-to-market fit. You have product market fit. Like if you're able to sell 100 people on your product, it works and delivers value and they retain. But you don't know how to train a salesperson how to sell your product, train 100 salespeople how to sell your product. That's going to take some learning loops, just like you did with the product market fit. And to try to do that learning with a salesperson that doesn't even work for you, that works in a different company, you're just not set up for success. So even if channel is a long-term scale goal for you, you need to have a temporary direct team to figure out how to sell, and then you can train the channel. The other reason why it fails is Oracle doesn't care about your product, even if it's a gap. And you need to make them care at two levels. You need to make the executive team care to let you in. And then you need to get the salesperson to care to learn how to sell it. Because those salespeople are making their quota without your product. And they're going to keep doing that, even if the executive team say to sell your product. So you have to incentivize at both levels. This happened with us at Salesforce before they went into Marketing Cloud. We got wind that Benioff, at the executive level, they were losing a lot of deals on CRM because their salespeople weren't good about talking about marketing. All their prospects were yeah, the CRM sounds cool, but my biggest problem is not managing my opportunities. My biggest problem is filling the CRM. And they couldn't talk about modern marketing. And they heard about us in the early days and those folks seem like they know what they're doing. Why don't we tell our salespeople that if they sell HubSpot, we will actually give them quota relief in the same way that if they sold a Salesforce product. And so suddenly we understood the pain at the executive level and aligned with it. And then they incentivize the frontline reps. So that's what it takes to enable a channel. Okay. So that kind of gets into that was very much a startup story. The thing about the HubSpot channel that was unique was a lot of the channels were system integrators, that kind of stuff. A third of our demand gen, a third of our inbound leads were people who were not wanting to be customers, but wanted to be resellers. They were web designers, SEO consultants, PR firms. And anytime they ended up on a direct rep in their CRM, the direct rep would come over and be Mark, holy cow, I just talked to this agency. They have 100 clients and they want to put them all onto HubSpot. I'm going to make my whole annual quota in 1 week. This is crazy. And it never happened because they didn't understand how to mobilize that agency. And it wasn't until Pete Caputa, one of my early hires and a great executive for us, had specialized a team on that and trained a salesperson, a channel salesperson, which agencies are good, which ones are not, how to qualify them, how to teach them how to sell inbound marketing in HubSpot, and how to teach them to make their customers successful on inbound marketing in HubSpot. That channel started to go really well. And like I said earlier, it was 40% of our revenue when I left around the IPO. And it was unique. Each one of those channel reps had 20, 30 agencies they worked with, and they got to their number without any demand gen. They literally, these agencies would be in Idaho and Montana and Mississippi and in random pockets of the US, and they'd be signing up 5 or 6 customers a year and making good money for themselves. And 5 or 6 customers a year per agency times 30 agencies was a really healthy productivity for our reps. So that's how our channel unfolded. And those are some of the gotchas and best practices on channel that I see.
Just conscious of time, Mark. We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Are you able to answer Dave's final question in 3 minutes?
The attribution? Yeah. It's tough, Dave. Because attribution, it's kind of when it's transactional, it's a lot easier. You can do first touch attribution on transaction. If you have a less than 60-day sales cycle, you can do first touch attribution, which means if a SDR cold called into account and they booked a meeting, and then a week later that account downloads an ebook, that counts as the cold calling attribution, not the marketing, and vice versa. If some account comes in and downloads an ebook and then some SDR calls them and gets a meeting, that's a marketing attribute attributed. So you can do first touch attribution, and that attribution, that first touch expires after 60 days if no opportunity, and it resets the clock. It gets more complicated in the ABM model that we talked about, where it's like, if like Thermo Fisher, someone at Thermo Fisher comes in and downloads an ebook, the last thing you want to do is credit that entire account to marketing, because no SDRs are going to cold call in there, and you want the SDRs cold calling in there. So in the ABM model, there are some sophisticated models that I think grow out of like the TV industry on like assigning credits to like the TV ad agency, like where you assign credits to different influencers, you get certain points for all the meetings. That's pretty cool. But I also see that like people are almost creating small cross-functional teams in the larger accounts, where it's like you have part of a marketer, an SDR, an account executive, and it's just like, go open this account. I don't care who gets credit. You'll all get credit, but just go do your thing and work together on that. So that in my 2-minute answer, Dave, but attribution gets super tricky when you get to bigger accounts.
Awesome. Well, I think that's perfect. Make that the last question. Mark, thank you so much. So let's show our appreciation for Mark in the chat. It's been a fantastic session. I always appreciate so much when you give up your time to share the SaaStock community. So thanks so much. It's been great. I've got 12 months to work on you to get you to Dublin for October next year.
There you go. All right. Yeah, let's work on those dates, and hopefully we'll
hopefully work it out.
The world is healthy then, and I'd love to come out. I haven't been to Dublin in like 5 or 6 years, and I love it.
That's it. Well, I'll buy you a pint of Guinness, and I'm sure everybody else here will do as well.
Beautiful.
Thanks so much, Mark. Have a great day.
All right.
And everybody else, if you enjoyed this session, please drop your feedback in Circle or share the SaaStock Founder membership on social media as a favor. And thanks so much. We'll see you at the next one. Mark, all the best.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Great questions. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.